Hello everyone, it's Mark again, and we're continuing our series on onboarding new organizations. And we're kind of to the point where the rubber hits the road. This is where we're going to go going through the process of healing the data that we imported. And we have a video that covers the import process. And if you go back to that, you're going to remember there's a lot that goes on in the data import process, and none of them are perfect. It's basically impossible to get a perfect data import. So let's talk about who this particular video is for. And this one is for the local secretary, the person who's managing the data at the local level for your local group. You have to have an account on the system already. So if you don't have one of those, go back to the video that covers creating your account and what you need to do. You're going to need to contact your parent organization and go through that process. And what this process is reconciling your member roster with the Groupable system. But let's talk a little bit about the concept here. And one of the first concepts we have to talk about is what is a source of truth. The source of truth in an information system is the place where the data that is definitive about that particular thing it represents is stored. And in the past, your organization really probably hasn't had a single source of truth about your members. Because if you go back to that original video we did earlier that showed you about that John Doe, and he had data in local 1 and local 2 and local 3 in the parent group. He had data all over the place. We are now taking all of those disparate sources of truth and putting them all into Groupable so that Groupable will be the single source of truth for the information about your organization and all its members. But we assume at the moment that you have a source of truth for your local. And that might be an Excel spreadsheet, an Access database, a roster book, paper records, 3x5 cards. It could take many different forms, but we need you to have access to that source of truth. Because we're going to compare your source of truth with Groupable. And why do we have to do that? Well, it's like I said, in the past, keeping all those different sources of truth together and keeping them in sync was basically impossible. But now that your organization's moving to Groupable, where there's going to be one source of truth, you have the ability to actually get all of that data in sync so that everyone can agree about it. So we're going to take a look at the process. We're going to move over to the app. We're going to be using Excel as an example of one way to do the markup and do that analysis of your roster. So we're going to go through that and we're going to get through this process. I'm going to just show you an example of some of the things that we need to do in this process. I break it into two parts. First one's research, and the second one is acting on that research. So we're going to get right into part one right now. Okay, we are in the app and I am logged in as a secretary for a local. And we're going to go through the process of analyzing the roster as it was imported so that we can reconcile it with our source of truth for our local, whatever that might be, that roster book or spreadsheet or Excel database, whatever that happens to be. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this here, which are my active members, and I'm going to export those. I'm going to pull them out as an Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to go ahead and open that file up. And I'm going to bring it over to the same screen here. I'm actually going to split my screen now. Make this a little bit smaller so I get my columns back. I'm going to put this over here. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger because even I can't read that. Okay, so blow it up a little bit so I've got a little bit more information here. And so I've got all my members here. I've got my member number, what their name is, last name order here, what their level is, whether it's a primary membership in my local or a secondary membership in my local if they belong to more than one, what their dues type is, age, and what they owe me for dues. And honestly, right now, what they owe me for dues, I really don't much care about. So I'm actually going to click this and I'm going to delete that column. It's not important to me. This row that has this little title on it, I'm just going to get rid of it. Just right click that. I'm then going to the menu and then deleting that row. So I just have my member number, name, level, the dues type, and the age. And I'm going to add a column, and that is notes. Because I'm probably going to make some notes about these guys because there's probably some errors in here. So this is the active member list. And so what I really want to go through here is go through here and say, okay, what people on this active list that my parent group thinks were active at the time of the import aren't active and why? And you would just go through the whole list, compare it with your source of truth, and then make some notes. And we're just going to kind of make this up as we go. We will pretend here that Francis Abernathy, he passed away. He is no longer an active member because he's deceased. And I just put a note in here that he died on 7/16 of 2022. And just make my note, save it. I can go down here. Let's say that this guy here, Carmine, that he demitted or he resigned, whatever the term might be in your organization, and that he resigned back in 2020. Let's say 5/3 of 2020. He tendered his resignation to our local group. And you go through here and just make notes about everyone on the list as to what their current disposition is. That's really all we care about at the moment. But I'm sure that there's a good possibility that there are some people that are not on this list who should be. And those are my inactive members who should be active. And so I'm actually going to go down here and I'm going to grab this again as an Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to save that out. Go ahead and open that up. Wrong one. Open that up. And I am going to take all of this. I'm going to copy it to my pasteboard. I'm going to make a new sheet over here and I'm going to paste it all in here. So I can have this all in one Excel file. And this is, we're going to name this my active analysis. And this is my inactive analysis. And I'm kind of going to do a little bit of formatting here. Again, make it big so I can actually read the thing. I don't need the top row, so I'm going to left click that, then right click it and say delete. Highlight all of these. Going to click that so I get the columns out to a nice width and I can see here. And I've got my name, what their age is, what their type is, what their local status is in my local, what their group status is, and then the time since that last event. And I happen to notice here that Elias Bartel, he's currently marked suspended, but he's not supposed to be. He was never suspended in my local according to all of our records. So I'm going to make a note column here. And he was never suspended. And that's an important one because there's an erroneous event on his member life cycle history, and we're going to have to go fix that. We're going to fix that in part 2, but we're making a note of that here. And then I'm going to go down through the list and see here that we've got Ricky Erdman. Yeah, he was suspended 9 years ago, but then he paid his dues 2 years later and he was reinstated. I'm going to make a note of that here. And let's say 9 years ago, that would be, let's just pretend he was reinstated in 2020. I'm just going to make a date up. So he's reinstated on 2/10 of 2020. Make a note of it. That's really all we're trying to do here is just go through this list, see who's on here, who shouldn't be. That's the big thing that we're going for. So let's say that Jed, this guy here, that he didn't die, just make a note of it. And you're going to find those. You may find some people who are marked deceased who aren't. They are alive. They're active members. People do get marked deceased in your parent group's database by accident. It happens. It's all back to that issue of synchronization between data sources or sources of truth. So if you compare your source of truth here to what we have, you're going to have one other group. After you go through the actives and you take out the people who shouldn't be active, you go through the inactives and you put the people back in with your notes. Just make your notes. Never suspended, didn't die. This guy was reinstated. What happens if someone is just missing? They're supposed to be active in your local, but they're not even here. It's 2 steps. I'm just going to make another sheet or another tab in my sheet, and I'm just going to call my missing analysis. And just because I'm doing this in Excel, you don't have to use Excel. Over here in the app, you could just print these out on paper and just make the notes on the paper. So the missing analysis is, who are we missing? And after going through my source of truth, my roster information, I've got a guy named Jonathan Casper that he affiliated with our local some time ago, but he's not in here. And so we're going to use this box at the top here. I'm going to type search for Casper. And I'm going to look here, and it is Jonathan. So we're just going to put that in, narrow it down. There he is. I found him, Jonathan Casper. And I see that he is currently exalted, which means he's a Royal Archmason, or in the case of this organization, he's a full member of the organization. That's their term for it. And I see that he's marked demitted or inactive, which means that he basically resigned, but that never got noted that he resigned from this other group, which was Lake Alfonso Borough, but he joined our local, and it's missing. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to make a column called member number. And again, I'm going to make the view bigger because I need to be able to read it. And I'm going to get his member number, which is right here. I'm going to take that, put it there. And we've got his name. And that's Casper Jonathan. And my notes. And we're going to say that he joined our local in January 5th of 2023. So it's very recent that he joined our local. I'm just making those notes. And that's what you just want to go through. Get the member numbers from the members. Paste in your member number, the name, and what the notes are for that particular person. And then we're going to work through these 3 tabs of the inactive analysis, the inactive analysis that you've done, and then the missing people. And we're going to fix those up. And I'm just going to add one more missing person. We don't know what the member number is because there's no record in the database for this person at all. They're just completely missing. And just going to make him John Doe, and he joined on 5/1 of 2023. And there's no record of it from the imported data in the parent organization at all. And we're going to go through how we process this spreadsheet and get all that data into the main system in the next step. Okay, we are now going to take a look at what I used to call phase 1, part 2, but it's really just the second part of reconciling your local roster with the Groupable system. And we, in the last section here, we went through when we analyzed our local roster, we did kind of 3 analyses. We did our active analysis, inactive analysis, and missing analysis. So let's talk about the active ones. So the active analysis, those people who are active who should not be active. And the typical cause of this is that they are missing an adverse event on their member life cycle history. Those are different things that change a person's status. So a life cycle event is initiated, typically then died. Those are the most common ones. Some people end up getting suspended, reinstated, they affiliate someplace else, they demit, all kinds of different things. But it's all things that either create memberships or change your status or change your member type. Those are the things we're going to talk about now and how we go through this active analysis and get those members off our active roster. So I'm going to switch over to the main app and we're going to go take a look at that. Okay, so we are here in the application. I'm logged in as a local secretary, and this is my list of active members according to what my group has. And over here on the right, I have my analysis based upon comparing my source of truth with the groupable system here in the spreadsheet. But remember, you could have just printed out this list and have made handwritten notes on it. Whether you do it electronically or do it on paper, really doesn't matter. We're going to take the first one here. This is Francis Abernathy. He's right here on my active list in the application. I'm going to go ahead and click his name. And I have a note here that he died on 7/16 of 2022. So I need to put in the life cycle event that's going to move him from being a living member to being a deceased member. And there's a couple places I can do that. I can click here to change his group status, his local status, or I can click here on the timeline on the plus sign here. I'm going to go ahead and do that. And you get a list of events that you can enter for this particular member. And I know he died. So I'm going to click the died link. I'm going to put in that date, which was 07/16 of 2022. And I'm going to add that life cycle event to his record. And when I do that, we now say that his last milepost was died and his group status is deceased. If I go back to my group, I can click the logo up here. We're going to see that he doesn't appear in my active member list now. But if I go to the inactives, I'm going to see he's right here, first person on the list. So if I go back to my active members, and remember the heading here might be members, MMs, different things, but that leftmost one is your full members who are active in your local group. That's what that tab's going to be. And I've got another person here, Dudley Bednar, and you might notice this is a change from when I did the analysis earlier. I happened to put in that the secretary demitted. That really wouldn't be appropriate, so I actually just changed that to a different person. We're going to pretend that Dudley Bednar, that he demitted on May 3rd, 2020. So I'm going to click his name here and bring up his profile, and I'm going to change his local status. I'm going to click that here, and I'm going to put in that he demitted from my local on 05/03/2020, and I'm going to add that to his history. You'll see that his status is now demitted here. If I go back to my local group, he is not going to appear here in my active list. But if I go over to the inactives, here he is right here on the inactive list. And I can see that his local status is demitted inactive. His group status happens to be the same thing because he only belonged to my local. So when we marked him active, that status rolled up to become his group status, where he's also demitted and inactive. And that's how you go through and you mark the active members who shouldn't be active and make them inactive. It's by adding a life cycle event for those members. Okay, now we are going to go through and process our inactive. And just a reminder, the inactive analysis, these are inactive people who are in the inactive tab of your homepage there in the app who should be active. And remember, you can get it as an Excel spreadsheet, you can print it out as paper, make your notes. And generally speaking, the solution to these is either there's an erroneous adverse event, like say a suspension or something on there that shouldn't be there, or they are missing a positive event that we need to add to their life cycle, their timeline, to get them back to being in good status. So we're going to switch over to the app now, and we're going to go through that inactive analysis and show you how you go through. Okay, we are back in the application, and I have the application here on the left-hand side, and I've got my spreadsheet over here on the right, and I am currently on the Inactive Analysis tab that we added there. But remember, you can do this on paper. You don't have to use Excel to do this. Just, you need a list. And we're going to go to the first person on my list that I had an issue with, and that was Elias Bartel. And according to our records, our source of truth, he was never suspended. So I'm actually going to pull up his record right here. I have his name. I'm just going to go ahead and click on that. And I'm going to go down here to his timeline. And all I'm going to do is hit the garbage can here on that suspended for non-payment of dues event. And I'm going to confirm that deletion. And when that goes through, you notice his group status goes back to active, his local status goes back to active. And if I go back to my home screen, under my active members, this is Elias Bartel. And here he is. Now his dues type is set to suspended. That's a separate thing. I'm just going to change that back to a regular member. That changes that as secretary, because that's what it would be if he's going to be an active member. Those are things that you set yourselves. We'll go through that in another video where we go through setting up your dues for the first time. But that's how we get an event off of someone's record. And remember that the calculation of status is all based upon the events on the history. So when we take the suspension out, it goes through and recalculates him. And the last thing was that event, what they call an exalted, that makes him a full member. That's why he is back to being an active full member in my local. So the next one I'm going to go is Jed Bednar. So I'm going to go to my inactive tab again, and I'm going to find him. Here he is. I'm going to pull him up, and he did not die. This is again an erroneous event that's on the history. I can do this one of two ways. I could just hit the garbage can here and take this out, but I'm also going to show you another. What we have is the restored from deceased event. The date really doesn't matter. Let's see, today is July 6, 2023. I'm going to go ahead and put that in, and all that actually does, it doesn't record an event, doesn't put anything on here. It just takes the deceased event off of his history. And that puts him back to being active and active. The Royal Arch Mason is his member type, which is their equivalent of a full member. So he's a full member in this local. If I go back to the home page and I search for Bednar here, we're going to see Jed is here and he is an active member of this local. Then the next one I have is Ricky Erdman. He was suspended, but then he was reinstated in 2020, and that reinstatement is missing. So I'm going to go to the inactive tab again, look up Erdman, and this is Ricky. So I'm going to pull him up, and I'm going to go down here to his timeline, and we're going to add the reinstatement back in. So the event is he's restored from MPD, and that's my local. The date of this was 2/10/2020, and I'm getting that from my notes right over here. Put that in. I can go ahead and add that to his timeline, and that's going to bring him back to active status at the group level and active status in my local. And so that's how we go through and process our inactive analysis and make the changes that we need to make those people active again. Okay, so we have now done our active analysis, our inactive analysis, and now we're going to go through and process our missing analysis. And remember, the missing analysis are those that are in the database, but they're not associated with your local, and also someone who's completely missing. They're not in the database at all anywhere. And so we're going to have to add in a new record to bring that person in and get them into the system. So I'm going to be going through both of those scenarios in the actual app, and we'll see how we take care of that. We are back here in the application, Apple on the left here, Excel on the right. I am on my missing analysis tab here, and I've got 2 records I need to deal with. First off, I've got Jonathan Casper. He joined our local on January 5th of 2023. But if we go over here to my list of full members, remember this is a Royal Arch chapter. They happen to be called Royal Arch Masons, but that one all the way left is going to be your full members. And I'm going to search here for Casper, if I can spell it right, and he's not there. But if I search for him up here at the top, I'm going to find him in the system. And that he's demitted, he's inactive, he was a member of this Lake Alfonso Borough, but he's not anymore. And so I need to make him a member of my local. And so I have this button right here, add to my local. And that's going to take you to the event entry screen for this member so that you can add the life cycle event that makes him a member of your local. And in this case, for this organization, it's affiliated plural. So I'm going to put that in, and my local is Latrinaburg, and I'm going to put in that date, which I said was January 5th of 2023. And I'm going to go ahead and add that event onto this member's record, and that's going to fill in all of his information there. And now I see that I have an affiliation with my local here, and that he is an active member of my local, which now makes him an active at the group level because he has at least one active local affiliation. And if I go down to his timeline, I will see that affiliated plural event on his timeline. So that's how we deal with someone who's in the database but not affiliated with our local. Now the next one we've got is we have our John Doe. He joined on May 1st. He is not in the system at all. So I'm actually just going to go back to the starting page for my local, and I'm going to go here to this menu on my members and others, and I'm going to click add. And I'm going to put in John for the first name, Doe for the last name. He is a gentleman. His birth date, we'll just pretend it's 1/1 of 2000, and that he was born in Troy, New York. And we're going to associate him with our local. And when he comes in, you're going to see that he comes in as just a contact. And you're going to see that as we go through the process here. Give him a phone number there, and I'm going to add that record in. And you'll see here that his member type is a contact, because this is how everyone starts. And if I go back to my starting screen and I look for him here, he's not going to be here. He is in the Others tab, because this is where my contacts are. So if I search for Doe here, here he is. So I can pull him up. Now we need to add the events that make him a full member of our local. So I'm going to click the plus sign here. And I know that the process for this is he is going to be elected. And I'm going to put that on 5/1/2023. Save that out. So now he's an elected candidate. Now I can put him through his being marked. And your organization may have different things for this. This is the process for this particular type of organization. And the next thing that was done for him is I believe he was received. And I'm putting these all on the same date because I'm assuming that all of this was done on the same date for him. And then the last thing for him would be that he has been exalted. And that, in this type of organization, makes him a full member. Yours might just be he joins, You might have just an initiation event. It all depends on what your organization calls those things. So I click that add button to add that last lifecycle event to him, and you see that's exalted now. He is a Royal Arch Mason, which, like I say, for this organization is a full member. He is active at the parent group, and he's active in my local. And now if I go to click the logo, and I go Doe here in my members, I will see John Doe here. I can pull it up. I can see that he is now a member of my local group. And so we've taken care of the person is in the database, but not associated with our local. That was the Jonathan Casper example. And then we did our John Doe, who was not in the database at all. We had to create the record from scratch. And so that's how we handle our missing analysis for our local group. And now, when I look at my list of full members here, this should be every person for my local who is currently active. At this point, I have reconciled my roster from my local source of truth with the now centralized source of truth in the Groupable system in conjunction with my parent group. So at this point, if you've gone through and actually done the work to this point, you've done the hardest part of getting your local set up on the system, which is reconciling the roster. If you haven't done the work at this point, you've seen what's involved. And as you can see, it's really basic. It's that active analysis, inactive analysis, and missing analysis. And it's all about just getting the proper events on the member's timeline to put them into the right status. That means either removing an event, adding an event, maybe adding a few events. But all of this is pretty basic and a very mechanical process. And I encourage you to get that done as soon as possible, because that's going to allow you to take the best advantage of the system to be able to use all the features in it to the best of your abilities as you move forward using Groupable with your parent group.